I want to welcome Canada to the very first web event of our upcoming climate change web series. So for those of you who haven't been joining us for all the great content Geoff has been putting on, thank you for all your support. Geoff has been putting together online events for the past few months now, and I feel like we've all become one big extended family. To those of you who are joining us tonight for the very first time, welcome. Welcome to the Geoff online community. We're thrilled you are with us this evening. So, as Phil just mentioned, my name is Karen Aflalo. I'm the president of Geoff Montreal. I'd like to start off by thanking each and every one of you for joining us tonight. Before we get started, I'd like to officially introduce you our MC, moderator, and program director, Phil Frey. So thank you, Phil, for doing this for us tonight. If anyone has any questions for our guest speaker tonight, please feel free to type them in the Zoom chat, and Phil will do his best to address as many of them as possible. Tonight marks the start of a multi-part web series that Geoff Montreal will be bringing to you to direct the focus to one of the world's largest issues, the climate crisis. Climate change has been an ongoing topic all over the globe for many years. Unfortunately, talk does not directly result in change. Just like COVID-19 has impacted so many countries, our planet is also suffering from a pandemic. However, with this pandemic, there is no vaccine. The only way to save the health of our planet, and in turn our own, is by every individual doing their part. Tonight, we come together to better understand the lessons learned and how we best move forward for our planet, ourselves, our children, and generations to come. We are so honored and privileged to have one of the world's greatest speakers on climate change here with us tonight, Laura Faye Tenenbaum. Laura is an award-winning, world-renowned author and public speaker on climate change. She is the former senior science editor at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, where she reported on sea level rise, ice mass loss, and climate modeling, to name just a few. Laura has worked as a professor in science and has written, produced, and edited oceanography video series to accompany Pearson Higher Education's Essentials of Oceanography textbook. Tonight, Laura has graciously donated her time to speak to us from her home in California so that we can all better understand what needs to be done to help change the course of the climate change for the planet and humanity. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome Laura Faye Tenenbaum.
Hi everybody. Thank you. So I can see about 5 faces out there, but I'm going to trust that there's more of you there, and I look forward to hearing your questions, so please type them in. Right before we started, we were just chatting amongst us, and I was going to tell a story, so I think I'll just start with this story. So I worked at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory for about 10 years, and the JPL is large. The campus is about twice the size of Disneyland. There's many buildings. It's where rovers are built and satellites are built. And there's also 2 museums. So one of my co-workers had a son in 3rd grade, and the whole 3rd grade class came, and they were touring around, and I came to talk to them, and they were really well behaved. So I was like kind of feisting them up because, you know, a field trip's supposed to be fun and educational. So I was like, who likes Justin Bieber? And they were all like, hey! And then I said, who wants to be a scientist when you grow up? And nobody said anything. So I said, what's wrong? And one of the little kids in the front, they're 8 years old in 3rd grade, says, I'm not smart enough to be a scientist. And I said, who told you that? And he said, well, I thought it in my own head. And I asked the class, how many of you thought in your own head that you're not smart enough? And over 3/4 of these kids raised their hand. And so it's been kind of my mission or my life purpose to encourage people to embrace their inner science spark. So what that means is that people, all of you, you don't have to have a degree in science. You don't have to have a career as a researcher, but people need to understand some basic information about science, because science literate citizens make better decisions about everything that affects all of our lives. And here in America, you see what's happened when people don't understand the science behind this current pandemic. You take something that is a bad problem, and then it's made so much worse by lack of trust and lack of understanding in the science. And the climate change is a perfect analogy to that. So you've got a problem that's already bad, and to the extent that there's a very small group of very loud, very powerful people passing around a lot of disinformation and misinformation, it's confused a lot of people. So I encourage people to find that inner science spark. All of us who are curious about the way the world works as humans, right? We're curious, we seek to understand the truth, and the best way that we have of understanding the truth is science. It's the best human invention we have. So I made a couple of slides. I'll talk for like 10, 15 minutes, and then we can open it up for Q&A. I prefer to interact with people rather than talk at you guys. So one of the questions that I used to get asked a lot when I was a college professor about 10 years ago, my students would say, well, when are we going to start feeling climate change? You know, when is it going to start to happen? And now I really never get that question, because it's already happening, right? And it's happening all around everywhere. So you can see here, these are the 10 hottest years have all happened pretty much in the last 10 years, with 2019. We don't know where 2020 is because it's not over yet. But you know, 2019 was the second hottest year on record. 2016 was the hottest year on record. So, you know, climate change is already happening, and it's already happening everywhere. So this is another chart. The one that you just saw, the bar graph, what that shows you is the global average temperature. And this is just showing you the whole world. It's not heating up equally everywhere. So some places are hotter and some places are not as hot. But the interesting thing, I think, about this that I want you to notice, there's this color bar at the bottom. So you can see the darker red is the warmest ever recorded, white is almost average, and blue is the coldest ever recorded. And this is just for the first half of the year of 2019, right? All this data. And what I want you to just check out the whole thing is that almost the whole planet everywhere is either warmer, much warmer, or record warmer. And there's only a very few places that are much cooler, right? So it's over the whole planet. The other thing that, I don't have a slide for this, but it's not just in the summer, in the daytime where it's warmer. It's also warmer in the nighttime, so it's not cooling down in the nights, and it's not cooling down in the winters either. So you've also got here a graph that shows you carbon dioxide. So people used to ask me, and maybe I'm going to head off some of the questions that I normally get is, well, you know, climate's been changing for a long time. Yes, it has. So this is ice core data back past 800,000 years. So you can drill down into the ice and you can pull out the ice, and in the ice is little air pockets, little bubbles. And if you very, very carefully pull the air out of those bubbles, you can see how much carbon dioxide is in that air, and it's been trapped in the ice. And so those ice cores go down to about 800,000 years. And you can see the up and down and the up and down of the graph, but you can see, and those are the changes due to the fact that Earth's axis tilts, and Earth's orbit goes from an oval to a circle over 100,000, 10,000 years. Right? So that's the regular up and down. But ever since we've been burning fossil fuels in the late 1800s, early 1900s, you see this huge spike in carbon dioxide. So that's what's causing this current climate crisis, which is different than, you know, average climate change. And here you can see this is global temperature starting in 1880, when we really had good science measurements up until last year. And you can see the global carbon dioxide and the global temperature are super correlated. And then another thing you can look at here, this just shows you for every month. right? January through December. The last 5 years have been the last hottest years. So we expect that even though we have reduced carbon dioxide output, and I'll talk about that in a second, in 2019, I'm sorry, in 2020, since this Corona crisis, it's certainly probable that 2020 could break a record, and 2020 will be one of the hot. I don't know. I'm not going to make that prediction, but it's certainly possible that 2020 could break the 2019 and 2016 record. We're headed that way. So I wanted, for some reason, this wasn't playing. Oh, let's see, maybe it is now. But I can drag it. So this is showing you global temperatures across the world. And I just want you to keep your eyes up around Canada. So it starts, here's the date. Can you see my mouse? I think you can. So here's the date, 18 over here, starting. And I'm just gonna drag through and keep your eyes on Canada, right? So here's like 1900s, it's, you know, pretty cool. Early 1900s, starting to get warmer, 1930s, my house was built in 1936. And here we go. I was born in the 60s. It's kind of pale, right? Getting warmer in the 90s, in the 2000s, right? So that's 5 years ago, right? So the reason I put this up here is to show that the warming isn't equally distributed. And what you have is a lot of the warming is in the north, right? So up around the Arctic region. And you're seeing a lot of ice melting up here, up in northern Greenland, up in northern Canada. So a lot of the warming is happening in those places. It's uneven. So this is the monthly carbon dioxide for this year, up through kind of the middle of April. And you can see that, you know, we passed 400 parts per million concentration of carbon dioxide a long time ago in 2015, 5 years ago. And here we are up in 2020, passing 415 parts per million of carbon dioxide in Earth's atmosphere. And the question is, you know, what's going to happen now that we've been producing a lot less pollution? So I just did look up the numbers about half an hour ago. So there's been, since COVID-19 and the shutdown, there's been a 17% drop off for the last couple of months, right? So people are not flying in airplanes, they're not driving in cars, there's big factories are not producing, a lot of the businesses are shut down. Where I live, the big businesses in my neighborhood, because I have a relationship with my local water and power plant. And I know that, so Disney, Warner Brothers, and Universal are all like walking distance from my house. So those are the big Hollywood studios, and they take a lot of electricity to run a production, and they're all shut down. So that's just in my neighborhood. So that's why you're seeing a 17% drop off for these last couple of months. But the problem is, even in this year, in 2020, the carbon pollution is going to rebound as soon as we start back up again, as soon as people start driving and flying in planes and going back to start their businesses. So the best projected models, again, we're only halfway through 2020, is we're thinking because of the COVID crisis, there could be between the best estimates are 4 to 5% reduction in carbon pollution for this year, 4 or 5%. That sounds great, right? The problem is that in order, you guys have heard of the IPCC, so stop me if you haven't, but you've heard of the Paris Agreement, right? That happened. Obama in America signed it, but all of the many, many countries around planet Earth signed an agreement in Paris. And the goal was to stop us from hitting 2 degrees increase, 2 degrees Celsius increase. Because if we go over 2 degrees Celsius, that's like worst case scenario. Many parts of the planet are going to be unlivable, right? In like 50 years, maybe in our lifetimes even. And certainly there are some of you on this phone call who will live another 50 years. If you're in your 20s or 30s, I hope you do, or even 40s. Anyway, so to reach the Paris Agreement, we need between a 7 to 10% reduction every year for the next 20 to 30 years to reach that below the planet is unlivable, right? So I'm going to say that again because it's really important. Even now that we've shut down the whole planet pretty much, we're on track, best case scenario, to be 4 to 5% reduction in carbon dioxide just this year. But what we really need is 7 to 10% reduction every year for the next 20 or 30 years if we're going to meet our targets. So this is dire. And at this point, we may not even make the 4 to 5% reduction because it looks like it just depends. I mean, I'm not going to predict what's going to happen globally with this corona pandemic, you know, but it looks like, at least in this country, people want to go back to work and start back up again. So to the extent that we start back up again, you know, we won't be able to hit those targets. So I thought this was interesting. I did a little, and hopefully you guys will have a bunch of questions on, and we can discuss that more. I wanted to do a little bit of research on what's going on in Canada. So I'm going to take you to this website. So this is from Yale. I've worked with these guys. It's basically they do a lot of research on climate communication and what people think. So this is asking Canadians by like city and province. You can see over here, this shows you like the percentage of people who are thinking this. So this is, Earth is getting warmer. These are the people by province who think that the Earth is getting warmer. And you can see in many areas, it's like 80, 90% of the people in Canada, of Canadians, think that. Okay, so this is kind of interesting to me. So this is people who are saying that Earth is getting warmer because it's caused by people. And you can see, oh, wow, well, I don't know what's going on over here in Edmonton, but Edmonton don't think that climate change is caused by people. In Montreal, it looks like it's around 75% of the population, but a lot of Canada is like 60%. So again, this is, if you want to check it out, it's this was just done last year, the end of last year, Canadian climate opinion maps. And climate change will harm you personally, which I think is kind of interesting because I would argue that climate change is already harming you personally, or all of us. Some people it will affect worse than others. My province has felt negative effects. So I guess what this is saying is that people themselves don't feel harmed, but they feel like in general their area is feeling harmed, because again, that's pretty strong. And then people don't want to try. This is they're saying, should we stop climate change or should we adapt? And it looks like people want to stop it rather than adapt to it. The real answer is that every person alive on this planet is going to have to do both. Actually, every living thing alive on this planet is going to have to adapt. These are Canadians who support cap and trade, which looks like around half. Want to increase a carbon tax. People there don't like a carbon tax. And I didn't understand this one because it's a question of when, but the answer is in percentages. So I think I'd have to read this whole thing, which I'm not going to read it to you. Maybe you're happy about that. But I just thought that was interesting and worth looking at. And there's a pretty picture of Earth, just to give you a break if you're overwhelmed at all the negativity. I know a lot of people do get overwhelmed, but I think part of it is, I don't want to sugarcoat everything and put a fancy, I mean, the other thing, so this for me was the best part of working at NASA for 10 years. There was a lot of challenges. At the end, I was censored and forced out once Trump took office because I didn't want people talking about climate. But the thing that I liked about NASA the most was this whole idea of like trying to do things that are really hard. So I think when you try to do something, when I've tried to do something that I know that I can do, it's a different mindset than trying to do something that seems almost impossible. And I'm interested in that. And I think that's what inspired me most about working at NASA. So sitting here with this huge challenge, right? I just mentioned even the fact in this pandemic where we've shut down a huge proportion of our businesses and our output, it's not even enough. So how are we going to do that? And I think in this horrible time, it's also a time for opportunity and growth. And there's so many analogies for that. So I'll just let you think of them. I also just wanted to show you the most interesting thing that I did when I was at NASA. As I flew on this suborbital mission, we were measuring all the glaciers around the coastline of Greenland. We did fly over very, very northern Canada. So the northmost point of Canada and Greenland, you can see across from the plane. So that's the plane, that's me in my flight suit. I look so cute. Anyway, here, this is from the plane. This is a glacier that it's between 1 mile and 2 miles wide across here, right? And this is the Greenland ice sheet over here. And it flows like a giant river, except much bigger than a river and slower than a river, out to sea. And you can see these are the icebergs that break off and melt into the ocean, and then they cause sea level rise. So do you remember I showed you not that long ago that global map, and I was dragging the cursor along, and you could see how in the northern areas have been impacted the most on planet Earth. So this is what's happening. So the ice sheet is like a giant river melting down and these icebergs out, and it's rather beautiful, I think. Which just kind of reminds you of what it is that we have to lose. And if you remember how beautiful planet Earth is, then maybe you'll want to do something to try to save it. But this is a photo. So I'm flying over this glacier here. So then we're staying at a Air Force base, and on our day off, we literally walked out. This is frozen because we're there like in the early spring, so the winter's just ended. The ice hasn't melted yet, right? This sea ice that freezes over in the winter and then melts in the summer. And this thing is constantly slowly moving and dropping icebergs out. So on our day off, we walk out here on the ice. And this is a picture. Can you see those are people? And that's an iceberg, right? Stuck in the solid ice. So we're walking over frozen seawater to get to a piece of ice that's melted, broken off the glacier, and is now going to float out to sea and melt and cause sea level rise. So you can just see the scale of this stuff. And I mean, it's, to me, I was awestruck and amazed at the beauty of it, but also, I mean, it's, I don't know, take of it what you will. Again, this is in southern Greenland, the first time I saw a glacier. Again, I went up to a glacier on my day off. And this thing is about 60 meters high, so 200 feet high, and it's 100,000 years old, this ice sheet. And you know, so I'm looking at this thing, or you're looking at it now, that's 100,000 years old. So that's like the past, right? 100,000 years. And you can see there's a river in front of it, this pretty big river. And this ice is literally breaking off, crashing down in front of you. And the river is like the present, right? You see the river going past. And if we could all turn to the right and see where the river is going, it's going down the fjord and out to sea. And that's all of our future, which is sea level rise. And depending on where you live, if you live near the coast, sea level rise will affect you where you live. I know that there's some issues with saltwater intrusion if you live on a coast, and that's where your drinking water comes from. So it already is affecting a number of areas. I know Toronto is having some issues with saltwater intrusion. And here you've got sea level rise this is just since a NASA satellite has been launched in the late 90s. So that's how much sea level rise is going up. So sea level, when we melt the glaciers, they fall into the ocean, sea level rises. So here's a pretty slug. I love slugs. So things you can do about it, just really briefly. I say there's 3 things that everybody can do, and I'm going to talk about the first 2 really quickly, and then we're going to go into the third one a lot, hopefully in the Q&A. So the first thing you can do, I already mentioned it, is you can spend time in nature, because the fight to protect the environment is exactly that. It's a fight. This thing is not going to, change easily. So if you don't like fighting, you're probably not going to be good at this. If you're a fighter like me and you like fighting, get in the ring and let's do it. So in order to be able to keep fighting as intensely as we need to, you're going to need to take breaks, which means get out into nature. The second thing you need to do is just take responsibility, right? Everybody knows you're supposed to drive less and walk more and all that stuff. So go ahead and do it. The third thing you can do, the one that I want to talk about a lot, is participate in groups. And so I do a lot of stuff in my city in Burbank. We've been doing this. This just happened Tuesday. Today's Thursday. So we are doing Zoom City Hall. So I work with my local City Hall. And what's been happening is, since the roads, there's much less traffic. So people have been out everywhere, and you see kids biking in the street, families biking in the street, pedestrians in the street, and skateboarders, people in wheelchairs. So my city was already doing this thing where they wanted to widen the sidewalks and maybe change some streets to be one way only, and make everything much more more trees, more user-friendly. And they had a year plan, and then a 5-year plan, and then 20-year plan. So what's happening with COVID is all of a sudden the restaurants now want to be outdoor seating, right? And the people want to be outdoors. So they are going quick, and they're changing some of these streets. They're widening the sidewalk. I have a statistic for you somewhere. In Milan, I think it's 35 kilometers. They've widened the sidewalk. Barcelona, I think it's 22 kilometers. They're changing vehicle roads into pedestrian roads, widening the sidewalks, and making bicycle lanes. So people are taking this COVID opportunity as a chance to really make a difference and make livable cities. I belong to a group, it's called Waste Warriors, where we're finding out where our trash goes to and making a difference. And then I just left this up here for the last slide, and then we can talk. But I guess my point being is I think the most important thing we can do right now, and the best opportunity, is to get together in groups. And I used to say vote, but that voting means vote with your dollar, but it also means it's one thing to know who your representatives are and to vote for people who support the environment, to understand who your local representatives are, who's representing you regionally. Don't just vote in these big, showy major elections. But I think what's more important than knowing who your representatives are is they should know who you are, right? The mayor should know your name and to be able to work with you. So I think that's really important, and we get to do that in groups. And then you can join, I just ran through really quickly all those because it's not about me, it's about you, but there's green clubs, there's environmental clubs. If you don't have one in your neighborhood or you can't find one, then start one. Because there's power in groups. You share information with each other. You help somebody know something you don't know. You know something somebody else doesn't know. And then you share resources, and then you gather together and you become powerful, because one good deed by one good person is really important, but we need systemic change. So I think that's a good place to stop me talking at you. And it's been, I went 25 minutes, I think. So
spot on, Laura, spot on.
Some Q&A.
So questions are coming in. For those of you who have more questions, feel free to type them into the chat, and we're going to try to address as many of them as possible. Laura, one question that's come up a couple of times, and I'll let you elaborate on it, is we named this event tonight, what we can learn from COVID-19, a dress rehearsal for the climate crisis. Now, at the time, I remember we were talking about, that famous picture from Venice online, where the water's clear, the fish are there, and we started to talk about COVID and climate change, and everyone's saying, oh, the skies are blue, everything's great, but people are wondering why, more depth, why did we come up with this name? Where did this title for tonight come from?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I wrote a piece about that and published it on Forbes, and I think that's how you found me.
I read that piece.
Okay, so and then you contacted me through my website.
Yeah.
So everybody was so excited. It was like viral. That photo went viral, and a bunch of other ones. There were some from India showing like, oh, there's clear skies. And I think it was a combination. I mean, people are, you know, pretty down around the pandemic, be it, you know, because they know somebody who's sick, they know somebody who's died, they've been sick, they've been impacted financially by losing their work, so many problems. And I think people wanted something happy to glom onto. And yes, it was a pretty picture, but the truth is that we haven't really stopped climate change very much. And in fact, you know, I predicted after all that stuff went viral that people would forget about it in 2 seconds, because the urge to like be greedy would come up again. And you know, certainly we haven't seen a consistent, like, I'm so happy that the air is clean, let's keep it this way, cry, in the same sense that we've seen a consistent cry for other things. And even I don't know, I mean, part of me is like thinking that I've been very focused on what's happening in American politics right now, and I'm not, a lot's going on in American politics right now, you know, so I'm not upset that I'm focused on that, but I'm not totally sure what everybody else in other countries are saying about like the clean air and water, you know, because we're fighting a different fight here about racism and policing in our country right now, that needs to be fought. But it does seem to me that climate change is always taking a second seat to some other more pressing issue, sadly. The reason that I called it a dress rehearsal for climate crisis, because you can see the exact same pattern in the COVID pandemic, as the COVID pandemic is just a compression of what's happening with climate. So the climate crisis has been building for like 100 years, and it's crescendoing now, but it's a slower crescendo. And the COVID pandemic kind of started in December, right? And then it's, you know, crescendoing faster. But there's so many parallels. So one example of a parallel is that people misled other people about the science, right? They denied it. They were, you know, misrepresented the science, and you see a lack of trust in science, a lack of trust in scientists. You see the, you know, and people being massively confused. And you can even see that even in that Canadian website, the Yale website that did the communication surveys with Canadians. They're saying, well, yes, climate change is happening, but remember, only half of them thought that it was caused by people, which is a huge confusion. And we can I can give you some evidence of how we know that it is human caused, if you'd like me to do that. But so those are some examples of similarity. Another thing that's similar is the 5 to 14 day waiting period, right? So I've heard a lot of people, my brother is a genetics researcher. So he's one of the people I talk to a lot about from the COVID science side. If people got sick right away, instead of the 5 to 14 day period, then there's a way that human nature is that when we get like an instant reward or an instant punishment, the learning is better. But because there's this lag time, people don't learn as well, and they're going out and doing all the behaviors that they shouldn't be doing, and the punishment comes 5 to 14 days later. Well, climate change is even worse, right? Because the lag time has been like, you know, 100 or 50 years. And we're, you know, like 10 years ago, my college students were like, when are we going to see climate change happening? And people think, well, it's, you know, I'll buy the Prius later. I'll get the solar panels later. So it's always kind of pushed off into the future. So that's another parallel. Another parallel is that people who have done the least to cause the problem are oftentimes the worst victims. And it's a class and economics issue. So wealthier people in climate change will be able to move away from the coasts during heat wave. We'll be able to turn on our air conditioner. You know, we'll be able to, wealthier people, and I say we because I am including myself in that, it's just a fact, I'm not super proud of it, but wealthier people will be able to cope better than, and this is better than poor countries and better than people who have less resources, even within a city. So and you're completely seeing that as coming through with the dress rehearsal. So how are we handling the people with the least resources amongst us? How are we protecting everybody? And we're globally, we're not doing a very good job of that. And neither are we nationally in America. We're not doing a good job of protecting the most vulnerable. And the most vulnerable are taking the worst hits. So in the COVID crisis, it's the elderly, but that would be the same in the climate crisis, because elderly people are not very good at handling heat waves, and they're the ones who are suffering there. And certainly poorer countries are more victim to the impacts of hurricanes, sea level rise. So
staying with the COVID, actually, a lot of people right now, slowly as things reopen, are going to change, but a lot of people are having deliveries sent to their house. We're ordering off Amazon, we're ordering off eBay, we're shopping online, and some people are going to get used to this. It's easier, sit at home, type it in, let it come to your house, return it, ship it back. You and I were talking about this the other week, and we were saying that, yes, I'm not driving my car, my wife's not driving her car, the UPS man's driving his car, but it's not any better. Would you be able to maybe elaborate on that for people?
Well, I don't know that anybody's actually measured yet, because it's still so new. I'm sure there will be a scientific study that looks at, what the carbon footprint of all these delivery trucks are. Ultimately, it would benefit everybody, including the companies that do delivery, to have electric vehicles, and then they'll have no carbon footprint. Or there's a lot of new technology. There's hydrogen vehicles are available, and electric vehicles are available, so they could be powered by solar panels, and then we could all just be off the grid ultimately. And then maybe that would be a good thing. But you see all those cardboard boxes and the plastic, all that stuff. I mean, I think one thing for me, since I did, both my husband and I do public speaking for a living, and my husband works in the film business, and we both completely went down to zero. We both lost all our work starting in February. And, it's taught me that I need so much less than I think that I need. And I think that is ultimately, there's this whole idea about, oh, what am I going to have to give up? But I don't think about it as having less. I think about it as, having a cleaner house, having more free time, having more time to spend with my friends and family, having more time to relax and not worry about stuff. So obviously, yeah, we do need to consume some things, but, our society is a lot based on, filling this giant consumer hole with more and more unnecessary stuff that we don't need. I mean, people a lot of times people are staying at home. We don't even need clothes. I mean, I don't really get dressed very often.
I've got my sweatpants on right now. I told you. I love Zoom.
So I think it's getting people to reevaluate things. The thing that brings me the most joy in this time is my garden. Tomorrow is our anniversary, 15 years. And my mom was asking me, what are you going to have for your anniversary? And we have tomatoes, we finished the cilantro. We've got tomatoes, arugula, zucchini, cucumbers. I mean, we're growing all this food in our home, and it's just so joyful. You see people, out there. Today, when I got bored, I go and stand next to the zucchini because it's cool. And I saw a bee fly into the zucchini flower and pollinate it, the little blossom. And I was just like, well, that's a cool thing. I mean, so we're gaining that by not rushing around, being so hectic all the time, doing our busy job, feeling like we're self-important. And I don't know that I want to go back to running around. I don't know whether I want to miss the bee pollinating a squash blossom and then eating it the next day.
First of all, happy anniversary, early anniversary to many more. You touched on the cardboard boxes and all this during transport. And Karen is asking, in much of Canada, it's hard to get fresh fruits and vegetables locally for much of the year. We have harsh winters. To transport these in the most efficient and cost-effective way, a lot of one-use plastic is used. What's the solution to this?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. So I was working in Barcelona on a museum exhibit on climate change. And the very last section of the exhibit was the future of kitchens. And the future kitchen has a little greenhouse that's run by solar in it. And I happen to know a little bit about this because at NASA, I did work with the people on the space station, and obviously they don't really, they have to grow all their food inside. And so they get some shipped up. They don't grow all their food, but they're working on growing all their food. And so you can have a greenhouse indoors. And I think the cool thing about that, and you've seen there's some of these really cool ones where they're growing vertical food, and like all these really nice lights and stuff like that. So there's a lot of new technology. It's not my area of expertise, but I've seen it. And we do have a little grow room here too in California in the backyard. So the nice thing about that is if there was, you see these, like, you're probably not going to have hurricanes or tropical cyclones, but you see areas like Texas that has a huge tropical cyclone, and people literally are cut off. They don't have food. Or here in California, we have wildfires, and I know that there's some fires up there in Canada too. So there are times during a climate emergency where you will be cut off from food, and you need to have food. So I think the kitchen of the future is going to include like a grow room where people are going to be able to grow things. In the exhibit where they had this in Barcelona, I'll just tell you that they told me the thing that was the easiest to grow was mushrooms. So if you want to get yourself a little indoor grow room like they have in the space station, and you can grow lettuce and mushrooms at least. So somebody on this Zoom call, we'll try that out. And I mean, that's the nice thing. I'm advocating groups. So get together and figure it out. You know,
Karen, there you go. Grow your own vegetables, problem solved.
Start their own little greenhouse up there.
And Clyde actually was wondering, deniers say that CO2 is such a small part of the air that doesn't really make a difference. What would you say to these deniers?
I have said this. So I was hired by the Weather Channel last July to go to the Heartland Institute Climate Denier Conference and cover it for a podcast. And so it was at the Trump International Hotel in DC. So I went. So I literally had a denier in my face asking me this exact question. And the answer is, okay, so cyanide is just a little part of your drink. Would that be okay if I just put a little bit in there? Just a little drop of cyanide? Would that be okay? Just a little.
Interesting.
So small things, yes, it's 0.02 part of so a small thing, it is small. There's hardly any carbon dioxide, compared to nitrogen, which is 80% of the atmosphere. But nitrogen is inert, it does nothing, right? So small things can do a lot. Have you ever had a ghost pepper, a little bit, touch your mouth? It can do a lot. So it's not about the size of the carbon dioxide. Yes, it's a very small portion of the atmosphere, but it's about the potency of it. So
but do you think we can educate these deniers?
Say what?
Do you think we can educate these deniers? No matter what topic you're discussing, whether it's climate change, systematic racism, COVID-19, there's a denier everywhere. How do you get through to one of them?
I'm not that interested in the deniers. This is how I take it. And I could be wrong, but this is just a personal opinion. I think that there are, like maybe 10 or 20% of the people who are like, they research it, they expert, they really understand it. And then there's another like 5 to 10% who are like just, deniers, whatever. They work for Exxon, I don't know, whatever they do. Most people are sort of somewhere in the middle, right? And that's the audience that I'm really interested in. And I think that the denier industrial complex, I mean, they're the ones who are getting funded by the fossil fuel companies to, to maintain the status quo. I will tell you that there was one person of color in that meeting. There's like 200 people there. And they were so, I mean, I don't want to be ageist, but there was a lot of canes and a lot of like, not gray hair, white hair. And then the other weird thing, this is the only time in my life this has ever happened to me. During the break, the men's room line was really long and the ladies' room had no line at all. So, yeah. So they were all like octogenarian old white dudes. Denying. Okay. So if that, I'm not sure what that says, but I'm just reporting. But anyway, I'm not sure they want to be convinced, but I think it's the people who their job is to sow disinformation so that people are confused, because when people are confused, they won't take action. Mm-hmm. So they don't even have to convince anybody of anything. They just have to confuse you enough so that you're stuck going, I don't know, I'll do something else. Does that make sense? And I'm more concerned with, what's the downside? Like, does anybody really want, do people care about the combustion engine? Do we really want this pollution? Do you really, I mean, look, go stand behind a tailpipe. How great is it?
Yeah.
Like even if you don't even have to believe in climate change to want a cleaner environment. Don't you want a cleaner environment for yourself, for your kids? Don't you want to work together for clean water, clean air? Oh, and there was a question, what is the alternative to plastic?
Actually, we're about to get more into plastic. On that note, to hold that thought, okay. We're saying, what, just for ourselves, cleaner air, healthier life.
Exactly.
Why isn't more being done?
Run toward a clean environment. Who doesn't want that?
But then why isn't more being done with recycling? Like, why aren't more people recycling and reusing plastic, plastic water bottles? Why are everyone still walking around with water bottles?
We don't need plastic water bottles at all, really. I mean, all that's in plastic water bottles is tap water. So just bring your own water. I mean, that one's easy. I mean, the portable water bottles. I mean, even you're seeing that now. You're seeing those water filling stations in schools, in airports, in public places. A lot of buildings have the refill water bottles. So, I mean, that is starting to change. Again, it's marketing. People are starting to ban, in California, we had a single-use plastic ban. They retracted it during the COVID thing, but we'll get that back again.
That was going to be my next question is, do you think, I play golf every Saturday. Last weekend, it's 38 degrees. I've got my water bottle from home. It's filled up with tap water. Same thing to me. Do you think now with COVID, I'm walking on the golf course though, I'm not going to refill it in a public thing because there is no public refiller.
Yeah, people have had to dial that stuff back because of the COVID, for sure.
So is this going to have a retroeffect on the progress we've made?
Using plastic was invented in the 50s. It really, so literally it's been 70 years and our whole planet is covered in plastic. It's ridiculous. I have a Barbie doll. My husband worked on a Barbie commercial and he brought me a Barbie doll and I had it in my office. I still have it somewhere. And it's to remind me that the Barbie doll is more real than I am, because that Barbie doll will last for 100 million years. It will still be here. Plastic, it doesn't biodegrade. It's just going to be here. Once the human race will go extinct eventually, we've only been around about 5 million years. Our plastic will stay on planet Earth for 100 million years. It's crazy.
So Sandy, I hope that answers your question about plastic.
I mean, some of it is necessary, obviously, but I mean, they're already trying to make it out of kelp and other biodegradable things. But yeah, I mean, you want to try to shift your lifestyle as best as possible and also work on, the moneyed interests want to sell you things. The cost of the plastic, is cheap only because the cost of its disposal is not included in the cost. So you saw that Waste Warrior slide. I could go on about this, what is it? It's 10 till. You know, you've got another 20 minutes to talk about plastic. I'll talk about plastic, but you know that the plastic companies don't want you to know that you are already paying for its disposal. Go look at, when I look at my I've got water, electric, and sewer bill all comes in one bill, and the trash is on there, right? And the garbage truck is on there. I've actually been to my own landfill and I've been to my own recycle center. So the best thing you can do is go to your recycle center, build a relationship with those people, go inside, go see where it all goes. 4th of July is coming up in America. If you go to the recycle center the week after 4th of July, you see all the stupid patriotic plastic crap is in a giant heap thrown away. Same if you go in beginning of January, all those cute Christmas things are all just thrown in a heap. It's really, you know, it's crazy. But yeah, go and check it out. Now I was going to say, anyway, you can get a single-use plastic bans, and you know, I bought it's a little like fork and spoon wooden thing that you carry around, so you don't have to get plastic takeaway, and you can bring with you plastic. You can bring like wood or metal or glass, or there's another company selling silicone, which is good for you, and keep all your stuff in silicone. If you want, I'll forward you the link to that company that has silicone bags. But yeah, there's alternatives. We just got to get on them, pass laws. People aren't going to do it without passing laws.
We actually got a question here from Dan. Dan wants to know, you were talking earlier about, you know, 50 years from now, some areas may not be livable due to high heat and different things. Do you predict that that some countries' populations may increase because people have to flee their own homes due to unlivable conditions?
Well, Canada may fare pretty well, actually, in that regard. And it is true that some country, you know, some places are going to do better than others as far as climate change. There may be some places that the growing season is longer, and you know, the climate is actually improved. And I shouldn't say Canada, because Canada is huge, obviously. Some areas of Canada may do better, some may do worse. There's a lot of forests, there's a lot of permafrost. So, you know, certain areas of Canada may do pretty well as far as the climate roulette. As far as migration and refugees, there already are climate refugees, there already is climate migration, but a lot of that depends on politics. So again, I'm going to go back to this. It's a dress rehearsal for the climate crisis. You know, we're seeing what's happening. Even isn't the EU next week is supposed to ban Americans from coming over. Serves us right for being such idiots. But you know, you know, the scientists can predict based on physics and science and chemistry, right? One thing that we are absolutely unable to predict is human behavior. What are people going to do, right? So obviously, if your village or town or city or region becomes unlivable, some people will have to flee and some people will die. Whether other countries will accept those fleeing, you saw, I mean, a lot of what's happening now geopolitically probably started during the Arab uprising when people were fleeing back then, and there were all that terrible stuff. So, you know, you're seeing greediness. You know, I think when you put humanity under stress, you see people act out of fear and greed and selfishness, and then you also see hope and generosity and caring. You know, you see those extremes. And I think that's why, again, this is a dress rehearsal. All the wonderful, generous things you're seeing, and all the fearful, angry, horrible things you're seeing, I fully expect to see both of those with every time any extreme weather event happens.
So we talk a lot about Canada, we talk a lot about the US, but Edward wants to know, given the fact that China and India represent a large portion of the Earth's population, what kind of hope do we have when they don't appear to be proactive, and on top of that constitutes a significant part of the pollution on Earth?
Sure. So part of me just wants to be mean, and part of me
Go
wants
for
to
it.
be nice.
Let's get real.
See the people. It just sounds like, well, what about them? That's what it sounds like to me. Oh, it sounds like a little kid. I have two brothers, and I just remember when we were kids, your parents would be like, who's fighting? And he did it. No, she did it. It sounds so, why can't we be leaders and take a leadership role and say, look, I know that other countries are polluting too, but the fact is the developed countries have been polluting way longer. And yes, India is 1.5 billion, no, China's 1.5 billion, India is like 750 million people. There's a lot more people, but the Indians are living in such dire poverty. I've been to India 6 times, and I've been to China 9. So, I mean, I've seen these places. China has now surpassed America as the most polluting country. But I mean, all it takes is one country to show leadership, one country to show real leadership, and they will be the country that, leads us into this new clean world. I mean, if you want to just take I don't want to take 10 seconds. And everybody, I can't see you, but just sit with your feet on the floor and close your eyes and just breathe for a second and think about a dream world that you wish that you had, right? 20, 30 years from now, a world that you can't even possibly imagine. In the 1950s, they couldn't imagine that we'd have cell phones and computers and the internet and all this really cool stuff and electric cars and all the amazing stuff that we have now. So just imagine 20 years from now what we could have, right? Some group of people, some creators and artists and innovators are going to have to think about that kind of thing and lead us there. And as long as we're going, oh, the bad people over there aren't doing it either, then we're not going to take that leadership role, and we're just going to sit there being immature little babies. So, yeah, somebody's got to do it. It might as well be us.
So when we talk about leaders, David would like to know if you can instruct governments, let's say the Canadian government, the American government, to do one thing and only one thing that can help start leading us in the right direction, what would that one thing be?
Oh gosh, this is a little bit out of my area of expertise. Probably it would be a carbon tax though, to price carbon. Oh, that reminds me of the thing I was going to say about plastic. Thank you. And I will get back to the carbon tax. So on my bill, you can see how much it costs for the trash to come, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the trash and the recycling. And I counted all the houses on my street. It's about 40 houses just in one block, 20 on each side. And I did the math. It's like $10,000 a year just to get our trash taken away. So you're paying for the disposal of your trash. And it's the same thing with carbon pollution, right? It's the same thing. We're paying for it, whether we think we're paying for it or not. So if you go and you eat a McDonald's hamburger because it only costs 99 cents and you think you're getting a deal, you're going to pay for it later when you're paying for the heart attack surgery, right? And it's the same whether you're paying for a cheap plastic shitty thing or whether you decide to not pay for carbon because it's cheaper, or all this stuff. It's all the same. We're paying for it in the end, so we might as well pay for it sooner. So I would say probably a carbon tax, because that way it just puts a real price on pollution, and then that money can go toward funding alternatives.
Okay. Well, before we wrap it up, we have one last question.
Have I been answered? I mean, you guys aren't pushing back on me because it's not I'm just answering. So are these answers okay? I mean, I'm just.
No one's complaining to me right now. And usually I get a lot of complaints when they're not happy with the answers.
Crazy chick out there in California talking about some nonsense.
No, we're getting real. We're getting real one-on-one, intimate in our homes. the best way to do it. The last question of the night comes from Rafi. What would your argument against human-made problems be? Like cow's methane, which is apparently one of the biggest pollutants on Earth.
Well, cows are man-made. You know, there was an animal like around 1,000 years ago called the Zorbchuk or something. I can't remember the name. Those are all extinct now. But yeah, it's not. Cows are not natural. If humans went extinct, cows would be gone right away. So that they're like, and it's not really a cow. We tend to think of a single cow on a grassy hill. It's industrial farming practices. Have you ever driven past an actual industrial cow farm? There's manure everywhere. I mean, there's one in Central California that if you drive on the 5 from Los Angeles to San Francisco, you've got to drive past it. Your eyes water for 30 minutes because of the smell. So yeah, it's not, I think people get a mistake about what is a cow. Yeah.
Okay.
That answer it? Cows
Rafi,
are
hope that answers.
That's weird, but they are. Cows are domesticated animals that are not natural.
All right. So before we wrap things up and let you go eat dinner, myself go eat dinner, I'd like to pass.
I'm not sick, but that I just thought that's my bad sense of humor.
I'm gonna pass the mic over to Galit, the executive director, JNF Montreal, to say a few words. Galit,
Can I just say one last thing?
the floor is yours.
Thank everybody for inviting me, and thank you for having a dialogue and sharing and listening to some of the things I have to say. And the thing that I think is the most important is to continue having a dialogue. This is not a one answer. This is not a 1 hour. This is, I'm happy to stay in an email loop or continue this conversation. This is a long-term relationship building thing where scientists need to work with people, need to work with the public. We all are in this together. So thank you for having me, and I'm open to ongoing.
We appreciate you being here with us more than words can say. Everybody, Laura has posted her email address, hashtags on the screen, so feel free to reach out. Before we actually
stop screen sharing.
Yeah, go for it. It's still there. Before we get to Galit, Geoff Hart, our Montreal Negev honoree for 2020, actually inspired us to go down this climate change route. So, Geoff, do you have a few words to say before we say goodnight?
Sure. Just again, thanks to Laura, who talked a bit about leadership. And I guess we, JNF, we're very involved with Israel and its innovations. And Israel has actually punched way above its weight in the green field. I think it's the only country that planted more trees than it took down in the last century. And things like drip irrigation revolutionized the water use in farming across the world, and made huge strides in many poor nations for how taking care of irrigation. And so JNF has some plans to actually punch above its weight to make Israel really a center for solving the climate crisis. So we're not ready to announce everything yet, but we have big plans to really help make a difference and show that leadership. And when you talk about the United States getting involved, it's funny that in World War II, Canada didn't wait to be attacked at Pearl Harbor, to get involved or say we're not being hit yet. They kind of got involved because it was the right thing to do. And so, we don't want to have to wait to the U.S. even the same thing till there's a big crisis like Pearl Harbor to decide it's time to get involved, right? Because it doesn't affect us. And so stay tuned for what we have in mind. And Galit's going to talk to you about if you do want to get involved in something super exciting that we think can make a big, big leverage difference, let us know. So I'll pass it on to Galit.
Thank you, Geoff. And thank you everyone for joining, and particularly thank you, Laura, for your time, for your candor, and for a really interesting web series launch today. Anyone here on our talk today that wants to get involved, Geoff is about to launch this really big campaign for the next year, and we'd love your help, your participation, your leadership. So reach out. My email I can share, or it's very simple, galit.levy@jnf.ca. My name is here. You can see me. Reach out to us. We'd love for you to get involved. There's a lot to come this year. Very exciting. And thank you all again to join us tonight. Thank you, Laura, one more time. We really appreciate your participation.
Thank you back. My pleasure.
Usually Galit's voice doesn't sound like that, but before we say goodbye, a lot of you are asking, this video has been recorded and it will be posted online. So keep checking your e-blasts. It will be going on the JNF YouTube page. Laura, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. I learned a lot. I hope everyone else did too. And hopefully our paths cross in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a nice evening.
Bye.
Take care.